Hi, Professor Kimberly Miller. This is Mary Murphy again, and this is my presentation on the Great Depression and the impact on education in America. And we finally made it to week 4. Yay! So, because of the lack of evidence I found in the discussion post that I did this week, I decided to change it this time to the Great Depression. And I actually found out something interesting too about this. So, a depression struck the United States back when the stock market crashed, and all the banks pretty much were closed down because they couldn't afford to pay everyone out, and they ran out of money trying to catch up with the stocks that they were trying to pay back. People were quickly unemployed because of this reason, and this became a huge problem, especially in the 1930s. Most people lost their homes and bankruptcy because obviously they couldn't afford to pay their mortgages without money. The government wanted to give loans to the banks, but not to help the American people. Herbert Hoover believed that the government should stay away from the people, that he should not interfere with what the people needed to do. But President Roosevelt wanted to help the American people, and he helped us to get out of the Great Depression. So now I want to talk about how the Depression changed education. So for the first couple of years of the Great Depression, school enrollment actually went up for a bit. We had a lot of working moms, a lot of parents that were going back to school to try to get better skills for higher education, to get better jobs. School funding was stable for a while. After 1932, school enrollment started to go down because obviously the state was trying to pay the schools, and they were running out of money trying to help the American people. Children went to school for half day, and this was a big problem for a while. The dust storms were preventing full day school. Many children were living in poverty because obviously the parents couldn't afford to pay for housing, so the government had to step in somehow. Now I want to talk about how the Great Depression impacted school policy and procedures. When I was reading about this, this really stirred up a few emotions in me this week. Married teachers were not allowed to work, so the husband was actually the breadwinner here. Um, Jobs were actually given to single teachers, so back then, single teachers were allowed to work versus married women who were forced to leave the profession. Salaries were cut for full-time teachers, so there were seasonal teachers that actually were allowed to stay. And to save money, their fundings were basically cut almost in half. How can you survive on that? Now these days you can't. Schools eventually had to shut down because they couldn't afford to pay the teachers or afford to keep the kids in the classroom. Overcrowding and limited funding was making school impossible to maintain. People were living in poverty. They couldn't afford to go to school, so a lot of them were actually leaving California because of this. Most children had to be educated at home because a lot of them were leaving, or some of them were staying at home to help the families. Now I want to talk about how the Great Depression affected our potential populations. Now I had to think about this one for a bit because I was trying to think. Okay, so if I was a student back then, how would this affect me? So obviously, students, a lot of them were not able to go to school because most of them were staying at home to help their families. A lot of these kids were the children of farmers. A lot of the farmers that were having a hard time maintaining the fields by themselves. So the wives and the kids were obviously helping them out to try to keep the farm going. Dust storms, unfortunately, were affecting these children's health. The dust storm was affecting the farming industry. So a lot of times when dust storms would happen, the children would have to go inside, or the school day would have to get cut short because of the dust storms. Um, Children were not taught by quality educators, and I was thinking about this for a bit, and I'm like, so they were bringing in teachers that did not have a full education, and they were the ones teaching these children. And I thought to myself, well, I'm a substitute teacher, but I don't have the training that regular teachers have. So I'm not exactly what you call a quality teacher, but I am an educator of sorts. Most teachers were put in there to teach, so they were just there to keep the kids occupied, and that was it. And they hoped the kids got something out of the school day. Some children did move away from the area again because it was hard for a lot of the parents to find work. So how has this event shaped my view of the American education system? Again, as I said before in previous weeks, I am very grateful for the job that I have now. I wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for any of these events in history, obviously. I also found out that some of my ancestors that I was researching for a history project recently, some of my ancestors actually lived through the Great Depression, and it was very interesting hearing their point of view from it from other family members. It is interesting to see how education has changed from how the dust storm came until now. So a lot has changed. Like the state has finally been able to keep up with the funding, and now we have a way to teach children. Like during COVID, we were all online for like a whole school year. So that was another way for us to teach the kids and for them to not be completely bored at home. How I see myself back then, if I were to put myself in a teacher's shoes, I would be working right now. I wouldn't be a full time educator though, because I wouldn't be working for a half salary, obviously. But I would definitely see myself teaching back then, even if the classrooms were not full. Education has changed for the better since then, and history has shown me what we have overcome as a society. Again, these are the references that I have used for this presentation. I hope you have enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you.